Start the meeting with a karakia from Councillor Cotter.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tāra ki tai, ki aki ana te atakura, ki te ohi huka, ki ho hu, tihe Māori ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Excellent. So I have apologies for early departure from the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and also lateness from Councillor Templeton. I'm happy to move them. Do I have a seconder? Tim, all those in favour? Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. Anyone opposed? Great. Thank you. Carried. Declarations of interest. I have a declaration on item 7. It's just one to do with the heritage plan change, just one property in there. So while I'll chair the meeting, I won't actually vote on 1B or debate that part of the plan changes that we're going to be discussing. I'm not aware of any other conflicts. Confirmation of previous minutes from the 2nd of March. Do I have someone to move that? Pauline, Tim second. All those in favour? Give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Excellent. Anyone opposed? Carried. We have one public forum today from Olivia Wanan. Welcome, Olivia. Excellent. So you have 5 minutes, and that would include any time for questions and answers as well. So whenever you're ready, you can start. We also have all the councillors have a PowerPoint presentation too.
Okay. I'll try to share my screen.
Okay, excellent.
But yeah, of course I can't figure out the.
We can share it from our end, and you can just let us know when to turn the page.
So hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a new resident on the northernmost block of Selwyn Street, close to Hagley Park. Like a couple of dozen others, I have recently moved into the sections that underwent housing intensification. And I'm here to make the case that Selwyn Street residents deserve the street amenities of some of the roads surrounding us, instead of a block that's been, well, a little neglected, I think. When I walk around the Christchurch city fringe and I see other streets with new residential housing or a mix of housing and commercial, including those on bus routes, I'm just so impressed at how attractive they are. If you kind of go through the first couple of slides, you see a couple of examples on different streets. You know, everything looks really attractive. There's cutouts, there's the kind of bricks to slow people down, and they just make the streets look great. And then if you go to the slide of Selwyn Street, you'll kind of see the comparison. So yeah, here's Selwyn Street if you haven't been down it recently. So basically, if you turn left, you come down Morehouse, you kind of turn up onto our block, you're coming up to South Hagley Park and Hagley College. Our block is split about 50-50 between residential and businesses. It's a major route through signage, which is shown on the next screen. Drivers heading to the hospital are directed down our block. So are a number of bus routes. Then there's drivers maybe cutting through the park or heading elsewhere. You might notice outside over my shoulder that vehicles, they're pretty much constant. And while it quietens at night, it really doesn't stop. If someone heads to A&E with like a broken finger or to the maternity ward in the middle of the night, they might be directed up Selwyn Street. I've surveyed the traffic at 10:30 at night. It's really informal, but we're still getting dozens of cars every half hour. And I'm pretty sure that means that our street is busier at night than most of the inner city streets. But while the block's residents get traffic, we don't get the status of being classed as a busy road. We don't even have lane markings, as you'll see from that photo. So I'm here to make the case. If you want to go to the next slide, here's all my reasons why I think the street would be a deserving, ideal project for a redesign, for the balance to be tipped towards residents and non-vehicle road users like bikes and pedestrians. Obviously, one of the most is that it's really busy. And therefore, I think a high quality road service and traffic calming infrastructure would be really warranted. It's also obviously really close to Hagley Park's paths and bike lanes, which means that it's really popular with walkers, scooters and cyclists. But unlike other busy streets, cyclists on this block have no protection. There's no segregated bike lane. There's no even markings for a bike lane. It must be really scary if they're being passed by cars and buses and trucks. Selwyn Street is also obviously home to a growing number of residents, people whose sleep, health and well-being would all be vastly improved if there was a little less speed and less noise pollution. We're close to a school and a preschool, meaning children walking or cycling to school, might be dropped off. They may travel through Selwyn Street. I know the council has built lots of wonderful cycling infrastructure to encourage active trips to work and school, but it must consider that just one block that feels unsafe or unattractive enough might be enough to mean that, say, Hagley College students just stay in their cars. And finally, a block of land basically across the road from my house has been set aside by Ranui, the Bone Marrow Cancer Trust, to build a facility for people attending Christchurch Hospital for specialty treatments. This might be the temporary home of a family that's been up late waiting for news about a loved one's procedure, or it might be for an outpatient who's undergoing treatment. These are people who, even more than most, deserve a quiet place to rest and recover. As a current resident, I'm not confident that's what they're going to get. They're going to hear cars all day and even be shaken awake at night by large vehicles rushing along the street. Recently, the council significantly added to the noise problem, resealing the road with coarse chip seal. I'm not sure if you guys are able to hear it, but it does add to the noise. It means the street looks like a wide gravel pit. There's no lane markings, no median strip, and again, no bike lanes. It's a short block, with traffic lights at one end and the Hagley Park intersection, or Hagley Ave intersection down the other. So drivers must give way because it's a blind corner. There's really no need for any driver to speed up. But believe me, they do. And I think that's because the road, the wide road, subconsciously tells them that it's time to hit the accelerator. But I also believe there's another reason. The quality of the road, the ugly, unattractive chip seal suggests to drivers that this place and its residents aren't really worthy of courtesy. I really hope that, you guys and staff consider what these design choices really communicate to drivers. When drivers speed along, the stone chip grinds under car, bus and truck tires, making the noise even worse. While you can try to ignore it during the day, and even the shaking of house when large trucks and buses go by, in the early hours of the night, believe me, you wake up thinking there's an earthquake. Every street around us for miles isn't chip seal. Most of it is asphalt. If people turn right onto Lower Selwyn Street, it's asphalt. Close to us are many roads with not only asphalt, but lovely 30 km/h speed limits and traffic calming features. These include many streets that have no housing, streets with no residents trying to relax and trying to sleep. And I really can't understand that there's any justification for treating this block significantly differently, and in my mind, significantly worse than surrounding areas.
Olivia, I'm going to have to jump in there because you've gone a bit over your
I'm over time, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay.
So what we don't have time is for any questions.
Okay.
But Jake's obviously online. So he's obviously already aware of it, and he'll have a conversation with his community board too. And we'll see have you had any contact with staff as well?
I have. I've tried to raise it with them, but I haven't really got anywhere.
Okay, well, I'll have a
haven't got much
conversation
evidence.
too, but I am aware, because obviously looking at that photo, the street's also still under, I guess, construction. It hasn't been completed yet. And so there's still...
Yeah, there are still cones out, but I did talk to the guys, and I believe that this chip seal is the permanent state that we'll be having. As far as I've been told, that's what we've got.
Yeah, and it's quite confronting, I guess, when you look at it like that. I guess that's what happens next in terms of it bedding in and then actually removing the excess chip, because it was chip sealed before this work, and then obviously the line markings. But I understand what you're talking about in terms of the amenity as well being an issue. But let's leave it with me, and I'll have a conversation with staff, and then hopefully staff or potentially Jake can also get in contact with you and just see if there's anything we can do as it moves forward.
Thank you for your time.
No, thank you very much. So the first deputation we have is from the Kilmarnock Residents Association. Tony Simons will be speaking on behalf of them, and that's regarding item 7, the pre-notification engagement for plan changes 13, 14 and 15. Welcome, Tony Simons. Welcome, Tony.
Yeah, thank you.
You'll
Thank you.
have 10 minutes, and that also includes any time for any questions and answers as well.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Just wonder, can you see that slide on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Look, thank you for allowing me a short time to address you this morning on the proposed planning changes that you are considering to accommodate housing intensification. I just want to talk briefly about the importance of conservation in the city, and just give you a bit of an outline of what our position is regarding these proposed changes. We are the Rickett and Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association, which represents a residential area under some pressure. It's the area, as you probably are aware, north of Rickerton Road, bordered by Rickerton Road to the south, and Mona Vale, the railway line, to the east, then running up north to Matai Street West, that vicinity, and then across to Rickerton House and Bush. So it's roughly a rectangular area, which is of some significance to Christchurch. The heritage and character features that we are particularly proud of in and around our area include Mona Vale, the Britain Stables, the War Memorial at Jane Dean's Close and Boys High, or there are actually 2 war memorials, one at each of those places, the original Christchurch Boys High buildings, the original Rickerton Estate farm buildings, the Kahu Road Bridge, and an extensive stock of character pre-World War housing which still exists in the area, plus hundreds of trees we consider that are worth preserving and saving. There is the iconic Avon River running across our northern boundary, and of course Rickerton House and Bush, which is all that's left of Putaringamotu, which is the original native bush area that used to cover the entire Canterbury Plains. We think there is an unacceptably short time frame for community consultation on these changes. However, we do accept this is because the government has imposed some timetables on you, and there's probably not a lot you can do about it. But it's the same undignified haste that accompanied the introduction of the housing intensification legislation in the first place. It's somewhat disconcerting. There's no way this is enough time for the people of Christchurch to digest what all this means and respond, I suggest. We're looking here at an avalanche of reports and recommendations. They take up 11 pages of your agenda today, plus there are no fewer than 43 separate reports, maps, illustrations attached as appendices. I struggled with this, and I'm sure the average person in Christchurch, the average community group in Christchurch will struggle with this as well. So given this complexity, we're really looking to you, our elected councillors, to make some courageous decisions and do the right thing by this city. We don't really see enough in these reports that takes account of the need to protect our area of Riccarton from development, from the developers and what they're doing. We are strongly against intensive 3-story apartment developments being allowed as of right. We know what they will lead to. They will lead to even taller developments in the future. I read yesterday that more than $2 billion worth of new housing was approved to be built across the Greater Christchurch area last year, and 2/3 of that is apartments or townhouses. That is unprecedented. We say housing is being provided already, and now is the time for some perspective. The Riccarton Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association was formed many years ago to preserve our residential area from commercial development. Somewhat ironic, we now find ourselves opposing residential development because this new law effectively abdicates responsibility for town planning to developers. In 2015, our association successfully argued before the Christchurch Replacement District Plan hearing panel for the retention of residential suburban density in our area. That panel was chaired by the Honourable Sir John Hanson, who supported us. It decided the area should not be intensified, and despite what council staff might tell you, that decision was not made because of wastewater constraints. In his decision, Sir John stated, "We agree with the Crown's position that a lack of wastewater infrastructure capacity is not a valid basis for scaling back on intensification in this area. However, on balance, we consider we should not make a direction for more medium density." In other words, his decision was nothing to do with a lack of infrastructure. Instead, he said it was based on the need for proper design outcomes, especially given the established amenity values in the area and the impact that medium density would have on those values. We spoke, you may remember, last August to this committee before the select committee hearings on the intensification legislation. Can I say we were thankful that the council subsequently put in a strong submission to that select committee. However, and we do read in today's agenda that council staff have employed a high threshold for including areas or features as residential heritage areas. What struck me about this was the number of areas they have assessed and subsequently discounted illustrates that very high threshold, and we're dismayed by this. In 2010, before the earthquakes, you had a list of 89 possible character or heritage areas, and in just 7 of those have been taken forward into today's agenda. And while 4 may have been added since, that's still just 11 for the entire city. In other words, just 7% of the original 2010 list of possible character or heritage areas have made it through. And that long list was drawn up before the earthquakes. The earthquakes then left Christchurch almost bereft of heritage. We, of all cities in New Zealand, should have a low threshold, not a high threshold, when it comes to conserving, preserving, and protecting our history and environment. And not just individual buildings or features, but also character neighbourhoods and trees. I'm a bit hot on trees. Developers say they will replace the trees that they chop down with new ones. That's not any kind of compensation. The real challenge is not planting them, it's keeping them alive and healthy. And when it comes to that, the developers are nowhere to be seen. So, just in conclusion, we're appealing to this council to set a lower threshold for character and heritage and be environmentally courageous when determining what should be qualifying matters. Take decisions boldly with our environmental future in mind. Can I say I believe Christchurch can continue to be a garden city, or it might even become a national park city, but that won't happen if we just sit back and watch. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony, for your deputation. And as you rightly said, this has obviously been directed on us from central government, and there is a certain time frame that we have to notify. these plan changes. But this step is not the notification of the plan changes. The additional step that we put in, we don't actually technically have to do it. I think it's a really important step, and that is the pre-engagement, pre-notification engagement, so we can actually go out and actually get as much information from the community as possible to hopefully help shape it more. So there's obviously going to be more time that we can have there with you discussing that, and then obviously that will feed into the final district plan changes that we will notify, I believe, in July. Is there any questions, Pauline?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tony. That was an excellent, really strong, clear submission. I congratulate you on presenting it so well. I've just got a really quick question, and you mentioned Sir John Hanson, and when you made a submission to that panel way back then.
2015, yeah.
Yeah, was that about the same area that you outlined to us, or was it Riccarton generally? It's that area.
Well, look, to be honest, we're approaching this from a somewhat selfish viewpoint. We're talking about the Riccarton Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association area. But look, the same arguments apply across the entire city. But in terms of what Sir John Hanson was talking about, it's exactly the same area that we're talking about today.
Great, thank you very much.
Jimmy, if it's a quick question, you can ask it. There's about 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Tony. Particularly concern Riccarton area, strong against the build up 3-story in the Riccarton area. You mentioned particular in the northern part of the Riccarton Road, or is cover even southern part of Riccarton Road.
Sorry, could you just repeat the last part, Jimmy?
I repeat is because you concern Riccarton, you are reluctant to build up based on the Mpsud build up 3 stories. You only concern in your area also cover the southern part area.
Yeah, look, the area is if I'm hearing you correctly, the area we're talking about is residential north of Riccarton Road, right? And it runs up about 2 blocks north of Riccarton Road. So I suppose at the northern side, it's Christchurch Boys High School, across to Matai Street West, the Britain Stables, and then through to the edge of the western side of Mona Vale. That's our area of concern. But look, frankly, the entire area from the route that the Avon River follows from Riccarton House right through to Deans Avenue and into the city is an area that's worth preserving. It's historic. It's the founding borough of Riccarton was the founding borough of Christchurch. There's a lot of significance in that area that we should be thinking about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for your deputation. The next deputation is from Tony Dale. Welcome, Tony.
Hello there.
Thank you. You also have 10 minutes. That includes any time for questions and answers too, and you can start whenever you're ready. Thanks.
Okay, I'll start now. So thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today. I want to address the meeting about the district plan changes PC13 and PC14 that will be discussed today. So first of all, I'll start with PC14, the intensification changes. So we see that the National Policy Statement on Urban Design has been formulated to increase the housing supply and thereby alleviate the housing crisis that's currently on in New Zealand. But it's been heavily criticised for its one-size-fits-all approach, designed in Wellington for Auckland and Wellington. So the National Policy Statement attempts to solve a problem that simply doesn't exist here. And of course, you'll be well aware, last year was record-setting for the number of building consents issued in Christchurch to the value of some $2 billion. And a substantial proportion of those consents were for apartments and terraced housing, the very kind of high-intensity housing that the government wants. So obviously the council is doing something right. Well done. There's no guarantee, in fact, that the changes introduced by PC14 because of the NPS won't break a system that's already working well, delays notwithstanding. And we've been here before, of course, when you think about how the government eagerly jumped in after the earthquakes to introduce the very same kind of densification that we're now grappling with. The councillors and staff who have been designing the PC14 plan changes must be uncomfortably aware of how perverse the national policy statement on urban development is for Christchurch. The introduction of densification around centres such as Riccarton and Papanui, amongst others, will act as a funnel to shift development away from the city centre. And the council's own modelling shows this when you look at some of the reports attached to the agenda. There is a little map of intensification potential of various suburbs around central Christchurch. And in fact, the city centre is on the cool side of the map. It's a temperature map, so the cooler temperatures in the city centre, hotter temperatures in areas like Riccarton, Papanui, and so on. And we don't want this. We want development, high intensity development in the city centre. We wanted it for years. The centre of Christchurch has been stagnating for years, long before the earthquakes. And it seems like there's very little in the national policy statement to fix these kinds of problems. And not surprisingly, perhaps, these are very wicked problems. Urban stagnation, population growth in the wrong places, and so on. So the one-size-fits-all policies in the national policy statement simply won't fix things. So the council recognises that Riccarton and other city centres like us are not big enough for independent metropolitan areas because they don't provide, and I quote here, the broad range of commercial, community, recreational and residential activities that would be expected. So the changes mandated by the national policy statement may indeed impact on these areas which seem like larger suburban centres but are not. And there may well be problems caused by a concrete jungle growing up in Riccarton or Papanui that is simply lacks the facilities that you might expect for a larger urban centre. So no one wants to live in a concrete jungle. There may well be social problems, and there are already plenty of examples of poor quality, high density housing in Riccarton. Once again, what is there in the national policy statement to fix these kinds of things? In fact, the PC14 changes will increase of allowable site density, building coverage in a section, building height and height to boundary, and it will decrease the minimum setback, site area and outdoor living space. And all of those changes will impact existing residents as well as new builds. So instead of trying to provide better amenities for the population, these changes will make things worse if they're not well controlled. And what is there in the planning changes to control development to provide amenity values? Will there even be any consideration of them? The Resource Management Act, with its definition of amenity values, is going to be repealed. There's very little mention in the newer legislation of such things. Finally, the lack of consultation is a real risk for PC14, as Tony Simon has already pointed out, because the implementation deadline is very close. And while the council is trying to mitigate against these things and include as much consultation as possible with the pre-notification consultation and so on, these changes are drastic. I mean, they're the very changes that we feared back in the days of the earthquake planning changes. Now it's coming to pass, and with an even tighter deadline of only months. These changes are drastic. And what is there to protect our amenity values? So next, I'd like to talk about PC13, the heritage plan change.
Tony, just to let you know, you've got about 2.5 minutes left.
Right. I'll motor through it then. So Riccarton is the founding borough of Christchurch, and yet almost none of Riccarton has been classified as a residential heritage area. There's only the small area around the Pico and Shan Crescents. There is a case to classify the entire area bounded by Riccarton Road, Prairie Street, Pendleton Road and Deans Avenue when you consider the historic buildings that that area contains, such as Mona Vale and the Britain Stables. What is there to prevent Riccarton Bush being surrounded by 6-storey apartment blocks? Generally, why aren't there many more residential heritage areas than the 11 that are identified in the council reports? After the earthquakes, Christchurch lost many more heritage buildings than other New Zealand cities have, and especially worrying is the high rise and dense housing mandated by the NPS that will dramatically change the character of Riccarton if development is left to run rampant. And yet, there have already been decisions in the past saying that we should not intensify areas such as Riccarton. That is because of amenity and character, important values that we need to preserve. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony. There's a minute left. Does anyone have a question? No. Excellent. Thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
The last deputation is from Helen Broughton. Welcome, Helen. You also have 10 minutes, which includes time for any questions and answers. Start when you're ready. Thanks. Sorry, Helen, we can't hear you. Sorry, you're still not coming through, Helen?
She just needs to unmute.
You need to unmute.
Mute.
Good. Thank you. Hi, Jack. Hi, Jake. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I spent 3 hours on Saturday going through chapter 14, which is the residential chapter. I'm going to say this is a very sad day for Christchurch. It's the day that council will need to place or start to place into its district plan high-rise development across all of Christchurch. Particularly sad that the council is not doing it through its own will, but this change has been driven by central government. The changes, as you know, are required by the National Policy Statement 2021, and both regional councils and our council have no option but to implement. So what is proposed today, or what is going forward today, will change the city forever. I'm aware that some of you are not comfortable with this, and can I ask you to record the fact through a resolution to state that the City Council is reluctantly putting this forward, but has been required to do so by central government. I really believe that we need to make it very clear for the future and people looking back what has caused this district plan change, because it's not going to be acceptable to Christchurch people. Just a minute. I want to speak and positively about the effort that Council made in late 2019 with a 30-page submission to government requesting that Christchurch not be a Tier 1 city. Council's submission was ignored. We became a Tier 1 city, and that is why today you have to push through these planning requirements. Council staff must have been under a huge pressure to produce this document, and I'd like to make two, what I think are positive comments. The 5 large centres are not defined as metropolitan centres, and I think that's positive because a lot of issues would have flown from that. And the 2020 version of 6 stories around commercial centres seemed to me, by reading Plan Chapter 14, to not being adapted at this stage. Now, I've had a late evening conversation with Tony Stevenson, who advised me that some centres are captured in commercial centres. So the centre closest to me is Riccarton, and it may be not staying at 3 stories, it may be going to 6 stories, but it's covered in the commercial centre chapter. So I will try and get more information on that, because last night I thought that, having read Chapter 14, I thought there was no sense of 6 rise at this point. It had been deferred. So I'll clarify that. 2 technical points. I think I've been over this before. 3-storey buildings won't stay at 3 stories. Resource consents can be applied for. I believe you'll get 4 or 5-storey buildings. We've had an example already in Christchurch, opposite the Girls' High School, where 3-storey townhouses were allowed under residential medium density, an application in for 5-storey apartments, very small apartments. That got approved in a resource consent which was non-notified. So just be aware 3 stories won't stay at that. Currently, we have over-intensification. The residential medium density zone was meant to cater for 30 households per hectare. It's currently operating at 75 households per hectare. So we've gone far beyond what we perceived in the district plan. I don't know how you rein that back, but just be aware you're getting very dense housing, very few trees, a lot of concrete. And I don't think it's what we want in Christchurch. Now, I'd just like to touch on the area that both Tonys have touched on, and this is the area where I live. It's Rada Street, round by Riccarton House and Bush. I think there's 2 issues here. Should this be a heritage area? And the other 2 have outlined the heritage buildings in this area, and I think a case can be made. So I'm not quite sure what the 4 cases were who weren't heritage, who became heritage, but I'll have to have a close look at that. But I guess that's an argument that I and other people in the association can submit. And I want to talk about the hearings panel in 2015-16. A huge amount of effort was put in to persuade the panel that we should remain suburban density. We actually won that case, but it was a huge effort and stress for the community. And I do wonder if that should be seen as a qualifying matter. Now, we'll have to advance that argument, but I want to make it very clear that this area was judged by John Hanson to stay suburban density. It wasn't because of wastewater constraints. Some of the information from staff comes back as wastewater constraints. It wasn't. It was about the amenity values. So the last plea I would have is that I have not been able to talk to planning staff for about 2 months. What I would like going forward for the public is that somehow the staff are available to discuss these issues with all the public across Christchurch, or the ones who want to speak about it. It's hard enough for me to handle this without just being a lay person who's concerned. So a plea, please, if we, the public, can get access to planners or people who know something about these issues reasonably promptly. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Obviously, the decision we're making today is actually to do pre-notification engagement with the community.
Yes.
And I assume that you would support that aspect of what we're deciding today.
Sorry.
You support
that a
us doing.
question?
You support us doing pre-notification engagement.
Well, you have two options, I think. Well, you have three. One is you say we don't like this at all. We aren't passing this, and therefore we're standing up to central government. That's one option. Two, and this is the option I think is more reasonable, that you say we're passing this reluctantly. We have no option because of the central government requirements to pass these district plan changes for consultation.
Thanks, Helen.
And the third option is that you don't put that clause in and just pass it as is.
Thank you, Sam.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Helen. I just wondered your comment at the very beginning about the resolution that you suggested. Would you be able to circulate that, perhaps?
You have it
About
there, don't you?
your concerns around it. If you could just circulate it, then we can have a discussion later on as to whether it's appropriate or not.
To the councillors.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the mayor. Yeah.
And the mayor. Oh yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Helen, for your time.
Thank you.
There's no presentation of petitions, so we'll move to item 7, which is the Mpsud pre-notification engagement for plan changes 13, 14 and 15, and we have presenting Emily, and as Mark might be there as well. Welcome, Emily. And I believe that we also will be starting actually with a presentation on the vacuum sewers, or they'll be incorporated within this presentation as well. And that's from Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Ike Kleinboss and Emily Allen will present the report, but I understand we're starting with a presentation on vacuum sewer capacity constraints from Michelle Mcdonald.
Okay, excellent. Welcome, Michelle. I'll let you take that away when you're ready.
Just want to make sure that you can actually see my presentation. There's too many windows on my side.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. All right, so this presentation is, the purpose of the presentation is really to provide some technical input into the plan change proposals that will be followed, specifically regarding infrastructure, with the focus being on vacuum sewer system capacity constraints. We've structured the presentation to answer some of the queries already received, and we will start off with explaining the background and decision process that has resulted or has led to the establishment of vacuum sewer systems. We will then talk about some of the vacuum sewer system design considerations and performance issues. And lastly, we will proceed to let you know what our immediate actions are before concluding the presentation. This is a relatively lengthy presentation. I will definitely try to move through it as quickly as possible, but there's a lot of information that we would like to share at this stage. As you're all aware, SCID was formed to manage the infrastructure rebuild after the earthquakes. And that included the assessment, the planning, the decisioning, design and construction phases of the projects. Infrastructure decisions were made by the Scope and Standards Committee and that committee included representatives from both council and also government. The committee made sure that infrastructure projects and decisions would be aligned to the infrastructure rebuild technical standards and guidelines that was specifically developed. The key objective of the guidelines was to make sure that the infrastructure could be returned to the condition that would meet the levels of service that was in place prior to the 2010 earthquake. It was also important that this should be achieved within a certain time frame. Only where reasonable or economically viable would it be agreed to build in additional resilience into the network. So for most, the mandate was to do a like-for-like restoration, and any betterment that we wanted to incorporate into the projects would have had to be funded by council. So comprehensive concept designs were done for both Shirley and Aranui catchment areas. Initially, Shirley was divided into 2 catchments, and many factors were considered during those concept design stages, including land damage, groundwater tables, liquefaction resistance indexes. Consideration was given to the asset age, maintenance history of the assets, and of course the condition that the infrastructure was left at after the earthquakes. Again, only if it was economically favorable would consideration be given to include for betterment. Another factor that was important was to look at the geographical context and the catchment, and specifically to look at the capacity of the neighboring catchments when considering alternatives. Alternate technologies was looked at when it was considered that it would be an economic alternative or that it would provide greater resilience. The options were evaluated in terms of a multi-criteria analysis where consideration was given to the constructability of the solution, the resilience that the solution would have, the planning and communication that would be involved in the solution, and of course the estimated life cycle costs. The life cycle cost considered both the capital cost and ongoing operational cost, and also provided a benefit for some of the options where it was believed that inflow and infiltration savings would be achieved. The life cycle cost also included consideration for what the capital cost would be for recovering the systems after a next seismic event. These are the options that were looked at for both Aranui and for Shirley. First of all, in Aranui, the first consideration was whether the gravity system that was in place should be replaced. Then there was also, the next option was looking at enhanced gravity, and what that means would be that the gravity pipes should be replaced to a correct or standard slope, and that would have involved additional pump stations and lift stations to lift the wastewater out of the catchments. Then there was considered whether the entire catchment should be serviced by a vacuum sewer system, also whether the catchment should be serviced by a pressure sewer system. At the end of the day, the solution that had the best capital cost and life cycle cost and scored the highest in the multi-criteria score was the decision to install a vacuum sewer system for the majority of the catchment, and for part of the catchment to install a pressure sewer system. That pressure SAP catchment D is in fact the existing East Avondale pressure sewer system. For Shirley, again, all options were looked at: gravity versus pressure versus vacuum. Vacuum again came out as the least cost solution. Initially, it was decided for the largest part of Shirley that enhanced gravity should be done, That would have, however, involved three additional pump stations, 4 lift stations, and even some pressure. That option was then compared with the option to install vacuum sewer system. And of course, again, the vacuum sewer system had the least life cycle cost and had the highest multi-criteria score. So just to close off this part, decisions were made through several meetings, workshops, presentations, by council, by SCUT officials, and by city care experts. Just for interest, as part of the SCUT decision process, Naitau independently concluded that a vacuum sewer system would be the ideal solution for the new Preston's development. And I believe that this likely dissipated some of the initial reluctance that was left to install new technology in Aranui and Shirley, knowing that a vacuum sewer system, the technology would in fact be introduced into Christchurch at Preston's. So to conclude this part, just to highlight again why pressure sewer systems were not installed in Shirley and Aranui. There were many factors, including the need for property owner consent to do works on private property. In other areas where pressure sewer systems were installed, there were several delays to communicate and to agree on the placement of the pump chambers. Also, pressure sewer systems were at that stage regarded in a very negative. For securing council infrastructure on private property is a complex issue which remains to this day. There's also always ongoing maintenance accessibility issues for council infrastructure on private property. But lastly, the cost for installing pressure sewer systems was simply just higher than for installing a vacuum sewer system. And also to note that in the SCUT times, pressure sewer systems were actually installed without smart controls. So the SCUT pressure sewer systems, we also don't really have visibility over those pump operations. Nowadays, for the new development areas, we install the systems with smart controls so that we could have better operational accessibility. To look at the design consideration of a vacuum sewer system, we've brought in these two schematics, which shows the difference between a normal gravity system and a vacuum sewer system, where in the case of vacuum, we have up to 4 preferred houses connected to a communal vacuum collection pit or vacuum chamber. This chamber contains a valve that operates pneumatically because of the vacuum that's in the vacuum pipes. And this allows wastewater to be sucked out of the chamber towards the vacuum pump station. Because of the way that a vacuum sewer system operates, it allows us to establish vacuum pipes at a much shallower depth than what would typically be the case for pressure. Then for pressure sewer systems, just want to take one slide back. You note that the operating part of vacuum sewer systems are all established on the public domain side, whereas for pressure sewer systems, the operating part is really established on private property, with most of the infrastructure even going up, these are the smart controls, going up to the external wall of their house. When SCUT made the decision, or when they looked at pressure sewer as an option, they did look at the opportunity to potentially move these pressure sewer pumps outside of private property and have communal pressure sewer pumps. But yet again, that would have involved a lot of extra cost and complications with bringing in electricity to service the pumps. So to look at so essentially for vacuum sewer system, you have all these collection pits connected to ever increasing pipe sizes up to a vacuum station. In the case, though, of Shirley, there are 3 vacuum mains connected into the station. So it essentially comprises 3 subcatchments. We call it a vacuum arms. So Shirley has got 3 vacuum arms with three vacuum mains entering the pump station. Aranui has got six vacuum arms, and Preston's also have 6 vacuum arms. A vacuum sewer system is really centrally operated. The brain of the operation is at the central pump station. Although we have different vacuum arms and different mains coming into the pump station, there's still just one vacuum connection to create the vacuum in all the arms. Therefore, these systems aren't really independent. They are collectively operated. This is different in pressure sewer systems where we have distributed operation. All these bubbles are the little pressure sewer pumps on each private property. And yet again, they pump into ever increasing pipe sizes up to a discharge point. Again, one issue that wasn't addressed in the skirt time was the need for order treatment. Because of the longer retention time of wastewater in a pressure sewer system, our guidelines nowadays calls for odor treatment to be installed at the discharge point. So yet again, this adds cost, both capital and ongoing operation costs, to a pressure sewer system as well. To look at what would it mean to upgrade a vacuum sewer system. First of all, the sizes of those vacuum pipes would have to be increased. The pump station itself, the vacuum pumps, would have to be upsized, as well as the wastewater collection tank that receives the wastewater that's been sucked into it, the wastewater pump station, and the rising mains that then delivers this wastewater to a discharge point where there is capacity. In addition to that, more vacuum sewer valve chambers or collection pits will have to be added, but this in itself could result in a redesign or defragmentation necessary for the system, because again, the more sewer valves you add, the more air you bring into the system. There is also the possibility to bring in several satellite pump stations to essentially bleed off the wastewater out of the vacuum system at intervals. But this in itself will be quite a complex and a large investment that would be needed to do this. Again, because it's not just simply a matter of bleeding off wastewater and pumping it to a neighboring catchment. There's insufficient capacity in the neighboring area. So we're really talking about additional pump stations that needs to discharge to the same discharge point that what the current pump stations are discharging to. This map shows where Preston, Shirley, and Aranui vacuum sewer systems are located in the context of where pressure sewer systems are located. So the orange is vacuum sewer systems, the purple is the pressure sewer systems. Most of the pressure sewer systems to the west of the city is the new development pressure sewer systems, whereas these ones on the east has been established through skirt. We've also included in this map wastewater capacity constrained areas for gravity systems where there are constraints at present and where upgrades would have to be included to provide additional capacity. One of the things that we will talk about in the next couple of slides is the inflow and infiltration allowance for vacuum sewer systems. These systems have been designed according to the Australia Code for Vacuum Sewerage Code, which does tell us that because the vacuum pipes are actually PE welded pipes, we only need to recognize inflow and infiltration that comes from the gravity part of the system. And that's essentially the part that's the private property part and up to the collection chamber. But inflow and infiltration must still be considered. Our council infrastructure design standards clarifies that and states that when we do design vacuum sewer systems, we allow for a maximum flow factor or peak wet weather flow factor of 2.78 of the peak design flow. This is about 64% of the flow that we design the pipes for is allocated for inflow and infiltration. We have three main issues currently with the performance of mostly two of our vacuum sewer systems. The first being that the inflow and infiltration flow, the maximum flow, the peak wet weather flow, exceeds that design allowance that I've just spoken about. This was a risk that was highlighted when these systems were designed. And essentially what happens when the flow is exceeded is that the air to liquid ratio is impacted, and this diagram tries to show it. So because there's more liquid and less air, the wastewater can't really be sucked out of the system as one would have to have when you have enough air, you can suck the wastewater. So what we call this is that the systems are waterlogged. And as I said, the reason for that is just because the flow is much more than what the pipes have been designed for. And all these results of such an instance, higher vacuum pump rates, irregular air to liquid ratio, we actually do see that in our systems at present, in Aranui and in Shirley, every time that it does rain. This graph shows the operation of the various valves in the Aranui catchment, and it shows the number of valve events, opening and closing of valves over time. Although the ratio of valve events in rain versus dry weather does not necessarily relate directly to flow, it does give us an indication of the degree of increase in flow during wet weather events. For Aranui, we can see that if we now consider that peak wet weather flow factor of 2.78, for Aranui, we can see that the factor has been reached and exceeded for Arm 6, and most likely also for Arm 1. The reason why Arm 1 is not showing as being exceeded is because that as a general standard operating rule, where we have water logging every time that it rains, the rule is that that leg is actually closed out, and therefore we can't see the valve events as part of this diagram. It's also interesting to note here that there's a long recovery period in Aranui after it rains before the valve events come back to normal, if at all it does. The same can be seen for Shirley, where we see that the peak is much higher. And in this case, again, all the arms are exceeding that peak factor. The recovery time is a bit faster, mostly because I believe Shirley is a smaller catchment. The pipes aren't that long. We see even for Preston's, that's a new development area, that there are cases where we see a very high response during wet weather. And that comes back to what we've previously said, is that the inflow and infiltration allowance that's done at the time when the system is designed is really there for not just now, but also for future. As pipes is older, and as it is longer in the ground conditions changes, and tree roots can damage pipes, and therefore inflow and infiltration, even if it's slow at this stage, can definitely increase over time, and that's why we have that allowance for future and not just for now. We can, if we look at the performance of the Shirley and Aranui systems of the vacuum stations during a rain event, we can see on this graph, the blue is the flow into the pump stations, and the orange is the vacuum. We can see that in Shirley, as the flow increases during a rain event and it reaches the design capacity, the system becomes waterlogged and we lose vacuum. In Aranui, we see waterlogging occurring and vacuum loss even before the wastewater actually reaches the capacity, or the flow reaches the capacity of the pump station. That means that the arms are just waterlogged even before the pump station can achieve its capacity. For Preston's, although you can see that the flow is much lower than the design capacity, knowing that Preston's is still being developed, we are also seeing already in rain events some discrepancies and some vacuum dropouts, which obviously would need to be investigated, but giving us the concern that there may be issues that parts of the system can be waterlogged. The second issue that we have with the performance, or the reason for the performance issues, really is because the vacuum sewer systems have been designed in accordance with the district plan rules at that time, and that is the living one zone requirements. Although the pipes were sized for some extra development, provision was made to subdivide properties into parcels of up to 450 square meters only. Vacuum pits were, however, designed and placed to accommodate the current number of dwellings. Overall, though, Aranui was designed, depending on the arm, for a density of between 11 to 30 houses per hectare. And Shirley was designed for a density of between 10 to 16 houses per hectare. As you can see here, which is a graph which shows the count of the recent subdivisions that we've processed and the density of those subdivisions, that current development reaches much higher density, 70 plus houses per hectare. The minimum density enabled by our existing residential medium density is here at 30 households per hectare. Then lastly, in terms of performance matters, when in 2016 the district plan was changed to zone 30% of Shirley as residential medium density, this decision was made based on a technical memo that was provided even before the vacuum systems were commissioned. And the advice at that time was that there is a potential to increase the number of dwellings for the system, but only if the peak wet weather flow component used in the design is reduced by up to 15%. So it was suggested that a lower peak wet weather flow allowance could be accommodated. It was, however, highlighted that that exceeding the vacuum pump station capacity would result in issues, and also that exceeding the maximum design flow of the different pipes would result in serious challenges. It was recommended that council must make sure that these enabled developments never do exceed the design maximum flow in the arms, and that council should determine after the commissioning whether there's any spare capacity depending on the wet weather response. It was also, I think, assumed at that time that inflow and infiltration could easily be reduced, and that repairs to private property laterals would be done. So we have some issues with advice that was considered at that time. Mostly because it assumed that additional growth would be assigned proportionate to the theoretical spare capacity of each arm. It also assigned theoretical spare pump station capacity to the individual arms, where we have been recommended not to allow that to happen. It also assumed that that the high flows after commissioning would be easily dealt with. It assumed that the inflow and infiltration rate could be reduced and would be evenly distributed throughout the catchment. And the last matter was that it assumed that the minimum enabled zoning would be achieved, which was 30 houses per hectare at that stage, whereas actual development exceeded that by far. In terms of way forward actions that we are already implementing, we've installed a vacuum sewer monitoring system. So we now have visibility of the operations of the more or less 1,500 vacuum valves in our systems. As advised by our suppliers, we have installed automatic air inlet systems at the end of the vacuum arms that were generally prone to waterlogging. Those automated air injection systems allow us to bring in additional air when there's higher flow, so that the system could actually operate during wet weather. But just the introduction of that air also reduces the pump station, the vacuum pump capacity. Our draft water supply and wastewater bylaws, which is now in front, the hearings I think just been finished regarding that, will strengthen our ability to ask private property owners to not just repair, but we can ask property owners to inspect their drains to make sure that it is in good order. And if found not to be in good order, that should be repaired. We can now use the vacuum sewer monitoring system data that we have collected to actually identify the valve chambers which is most susceptible to inflow and infiltration. This diagram kind of shows what we are seeing when we look at the operation of the valves during dry weather versus wet weather, where we can easily identify the chambers that have the most response in wet weather, therefore the chambers where the inflow and infiltration is the highest. We then intend to use our new water services bylaws to require properties that we suspect of having high inflow and infiltration or connected to that specific chamber to inspect the laterals and to repair it. We will also on our end make sure that the vacuum chambers that's in the road and in the footpaths are adequately sealed and that we don't have surface flooding of those chambers. We also intend to expand the vacuum sewer monitoring capability so that we can monitor the pressures at the end of the arms and also so that we can remotely control those automated air injection systems so that we can have better operations during wet weather to recover the vacuum sewer systems when the flow exceeds the capacity. In terms of upgrade or duplicate systems, we've presenting this table as a worst case rough calculation of the implications of what it would mean if the capacity of the systems would need to be upgraded. We've matched this back to the replacement cost of the vacuum sewer systems. Again, this is a non-engineered approach and needs to be considered in that context. So for surely what we have determined, if we were to break the rule of assuming that inflow and infiltration can be used for capacity. So if we assume that we can reduce inflow and infiltration by as much as 50%, and we want to achieve the density that would be enabled by the new legislation, which would be more or less 70 houses per hectare, we would need a system with a capacity of 3 times the existing capacity. However, if we maintain our I&I flow allowance, although ensuring that it's not more than that, we would need a system in Shirley that has 5 times the capacity. The same for Aranui, double the capacity versus 5 times the capacity. Obviously as well, this would give us an indication of pump stations that would have to be introduced should we follow the option to bring in satellite pump stations. It's still a lot, quite a considerable amount of wastewater that would have to be pumped out of the areas. In conclusion, when the decision was made to install the vacuum sewer systems, the decision was based on robust decision making, looking at multiple criteria. Life cycle cost analysis formed 25% of that decision. It was a collective decision. Granted, there was a positive outlook that the inflow and infiltration would not exceed the design allowance. And it was also supported by the Preston's development decision. The performance of the systems have improved since we had total failure in 2018, but we must also note that we've had less rain than what we had in 2018. Inflow and infiltration reduction, I&I reduction, will definitely still further improve systems performance to make sure that the systems can operate during wet weather, but it's not necessarily going to add more capacity from the design capacity. So what we are saying is that even if we do bring I&I down to what the systems were actually designed for, we still do not have a sufficient capacity to accommodate the MDRS-enabled development. At best, a density of 20 houses per hectare in Shirley and 25 houses per hectare in Aranui, if we factor in that we can have an I&I saving of 50%. So lastly, we would just like to say that the decision to upgrade or to duplicate or to the vacuum sewer systems will have to be also made in the context of the growth strategy, the overall growth strategy for the city, and applying and prioritizing where the highest return can be given, and that is the number of houses that can be accommodated.
Thank you, thank you, Michelle. Just before we move to Emily and Ike, is there any questions of Michelle? No, there's not. Okay, Yanni. Sorry, could you use?
Mike,
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Yanni.
We're good. Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for the really comprehensive presentation. Obviously, there's a huge amount of thought that's gone into this, which really appreciate. Just one question, which I'm still not quite clear on, is but areas where we've got high groundwater, what's the impact of intensification on those areas if we allow it? The places I'm thinking about are like some of the areas in Woolston where the water table is really, really high.
Yes, again, it comes back to our design allowance. So we provide for the ability for inflow and infiltration up to 64% of the capacity of our pipes. If, however, we have groundwater coming in that exceeds that allowance that we've given, that's where we start having challenges with our systems, overflows, and as we see now, where we're having our vacuum sewer systems not able to operate efficiently.
Sorry, I was just trying to understand, outside of areas that don't have vacuum sewer systems, that have the other new technology, is there any risk around intensification exacerbating any issues associated with that, especially with the high groundwater tables?
Yes, it differs from area to area. So that's when I showed the parts where we already have the gravity areas where we've highlighted in red, where we're exceeding capacity of our pipes, definitely. Right. there really does depend on which area we're looking at and what the capacity in that area is. But there are other areas in the city that is also capacity constrained. In some cases, we can handle that in a different manner, or we have more time to bring in projects to upgrade the infrastructure. And it's not necessarily always a complete failure, as in the case of the vacuum systems.
Sure, but just because there's so many documents, are there other areas outside of the vacuum system that we've limited intensification on due to the risk of?
No, at this stage we haven't proposed that it should go forward as qualifying matters. I think Emily will get in here on what the proposal would be in terms of making sure that that the capacity of the systems are being checked up front. But we're not suggesting wastewater to be a constraint for those areas, only for the vacuum sewer areas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yanni. Tim?
Thank you. Following on from Yanni's questions with regards to the high water tables in those areas, which are also concerning with the high or the flooding with storm events, with the intensification, the development contributions that are given for road upgrades of roading, etc. Are they? I think we really do need to know what the level of concern will be and what the cost will be to the ratepayers of Christchurch. So, are we able to get the future risks with those?
Sorry, I'm not too sure. The risk of the.
So we intensify in areas that you've identified the areas where vacuum are used, but you've also identified the areas that are at risk in red, but are not included in looking at having limited development. So
yes.
what?
Yes, we do have a master plan. We do have a plan to that tells us what it would mean to upgrade all those areas, and of course that can be regarded that will have to be eventually brought into the long-term plan so that it can become part of the district development contribution. So yes, we do understand what those upgrades would need to be. But granted that our planning has been based on our current district plan, we really do need to quantify with the new MDRS enablement what the changes would be, and we would have to reconsider the capacity of our systems all over Christchurch. So there's still a lot of planning that will have to happen in order to get a definitive answer of exactly what the long-term cost implications would be.
And realistically, with the time frame which the government has given us, we wouldn't be able to do that within that time frame.
No, that's part of our. But I mean, that's what we do in our planning space on a day-to-day basis. So we will continue to look at the new enablement, understand where the growth will happen, bring that into our infrastructure plans, bring that back to the strategy, and then incorporate it into the long-term plan.
Yeah, but okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Leanne.
So thank you, Michelle. Look, and just listening to you, I just it just reinforces to me the incredible capacity that we have within our organisation for both dealing with these really challenging issues, but actually to explain them in plain language. I found that an extraordinary presentation. And it's, I'm actually going to ask my office to send it to the Ministry for the Environment and ask them to look at it in terms of the advice that they give the Minister in relation to the MPS and also the legislation that was passed. Because I got asked this question, and I'll tell you what, you answered it a hell of a lot better than I did. I just simply said, we don't have the capacity because of the system we put in there after the earthquakes. But you have explained the why. So thank you so much for that. My questions are, I've got two questions. One is the draft water supply and wastewater 2022 bylaw that we're consulting on at the moment. You get to the end of the page and it goes where the council requires a property owner to investigate and rectify a drain, blah, blah, blah. Any repairs or replacements must be completed within timeframes as specified and agreed by the council. And what happens if that doesn't happen?
So then we will have to pursue a route through the bylaws or through the Local Government Act, where we allow through the Local Government Act to do it on behalf of private property owners and recover the cost from them.
So we literally can do that. We don't need to write that into the bylaw. We've got the ability to say, we've asked you to do it under our bylaw. You haven't done it by the time that we said that it had to be done by, and now we're going to go in and do it ourselves, and you can't stop us from doing that. We're going to do it, and we're going to send you the bill.
Yes.
Great, that's a good answer. The second question was in relation to when you go back to the assessment that Skirt did right at the outset around the capital costs, the life costs, and the and what you got for the money, and now to look at an upgrade to another system, the difference was between 10 and 20 million at the time, at the front end of the decision making, and now it's about 50 or 60 million. So have I read that right? And if so, why wasn't a potential around that cost, or how did that decision not include potential for increased densities in those areas?
Again, because of first of all, because of this good environment, the mandate was never to provide for future growth. Secondly, there was consideration for some intensification, but never to the extent that we are seeing now. So it was truly based on the environment at that time and the district plan and the living zone standards that was prevalent at the time. And that hand in hand with the fact that we weren't allowed to build in, Skirt wasn't given the mandate to build in additional capacity.
No, I thought that would be your answer, and I guess that it does kind of reflect on the circumstances that we were in at the time. But I find it extraordinary that the independent hearings panel was allowed really to operate off the back of a memo, which was a conditional piece of advice. But you can't comment on that because
I can't comment on that.
I'm allowed to say that, and you're not. I'll hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had a question on another one of the matters in the report. Not vacuum sewers. It's
okay,
yeah.
We'll leave your hand up, but we'll just get Emily and Ike to come on and introduce the item. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Good morning, Mayor and councillors. Today we're bringing to you a report recommending that Council commences pre-notification engagement with our communities on proposed plan changes to give effect to the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and the Amendment Act, which was introduced at the end of last year. The proposed plan changes are the Housing and Business Choice Intensification Plan Change, PC14, which is shaping how and where we grow our city by enabling more development within our city's existing footprint. The Heritage Plan Change, PC13, introducing 11 new heritage areas across the city to be identified within the district plan to protect Christchurch's special identity and character, and adding a total of 65 buildings, items and interiors to the schedule of significant historic heritage. And also the Radio Communication Pathways Plan Change, PC15, protecting our emergency radio communication airspace by stopping development that blocks it. We do want to reiterate that a number of the proposals that enable greater housing and business choice are required by legislation. Simply, we have to change the district plan. Also, there is a high evidential threshold we need to meet to support any discretionary proposals, such as qualifying matters. That said, we encourage engagement with our communities now, asking for feedback on the proposed plan changes, where we do have some discretion, is a positive and accessible opportunity for people and communities of interest to have a say earlier in the plan change process rather than at the more formal notification stage, which will occur later. We're recommending that we have a community conversation about these proposals as a bundle at this time because they collectively shape our city's form and how we grow. And we need to meet the legislative deadlines for formal notification by mid-August 2022. We know our communities well. People know their communities well, sorry. So it's important that we hear from them any suggested improvements or changes to these proposals. For example, if there are any heritage areas or character areas that will add value to this proposal. And we want to be able to respond on a case-by-case basis to these through sufficient evidence to support those inquiries. Regarding the presentation you've just heard about infrastructure issues in some of the areas of the city where the capacity of our horizontal infrastructure network will constrain further intensification. We propose responding to these through considering the vacuum sewer network as a qualifying matter and to include a district-wide engineering provision certifying connection to council's 3 water networks. We have heard from you and the community about how important and valued trees are, and your concerns that intensification will result in the loss of trees. Therefore, we are proposing through the plan changes to protect the schedule of significant trees in the district plan as a qualifying matter, and also to introduce a financial contribution to address concern over the loss of tree canopy cover. We consider this to be a belts and braces approach, using all the tools that we have available to us under the RMA. We'd be pleased now to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Sarah.
Thank you so much. And in fact, it's the trees that I'd like to address. So it looks like there's been a bit of an unintended consequence of the Mpsud in that the few 900 odd trees that we do have protected currently under the district plan will mostly lose that protected status. And so I'm just making sure that we do have enough resources to go through and reassess them for this and with enough time.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, we have a program of work which we're setting up at the moment to enable the reporting levels that we need to meet, the evidential thresholds to be achieved in the timeframes that we have available to us. This is a large program of work that we're scoping up to be able to protect the existing schedule of protected trees.
Yeah, but I understand there's some resourcing issues if we wanted to try and add trees, is that right?
Yes, so the schedule of protected trees will largely fall into the category of other matters under the Mpsud, and the evidential thresholds for that are high. Yeah. So we will need to do a lot of work to make sure that we are providing the evidential basis that we need to carry those through. And that will involve sending arborists round to have a look at the trees within the existing schedule, which is a large program of work. We are lined up because we do understand how important that is for our district plan and our community. So we are lining up to do that work, but it is a very resource intensive program and we are limited because of the constrained timeframes and how we deliver that.
But so there's capacity to do what's currently scheduled under the district plan. If there were individuals, rather than the whole community going, oh, I like that tree, can council do something about it on someone else's property? Is there capacity potentially to get a list together of ones where individuals may want trees on their property protected? I mean, they may not because there's of course value in development. But is there capacity or a capacity to put a list together in case we have capacity, if you like?
Yes, and I think I think it's important to realise that we are going out for pre-consultation engagement, and part of that is having those conversations with our community. So we do want to be receptive to our community as much as we can within the timeframes and the resourcing that we have available to us. So we will respond if those do come through to look at how we can resource that. It may be that we need a second follow-up plan change to address any matters which we can't fit in the time frame that we have. So we'll look at how we best achieve that.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Jane's got a comment to add too.
So just to add to what Emily said, if there is any significant number at all of requests for additional trees, there will not be time, and I think we need to be honest with the community, there won't be time within this plan change process to include those. But as Emily said, what we could do is look at a future plan change process once we've got through these plan changes.
Okay. Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. First question, because this plan change is very, very important, because based on your report, is to implement the Mpsud and also regarding to the recently introduced medium density residential standard. But today we have heard those four the deputations, particularly second to the fourth, those three the kind of deputations, they particularly concern this plan change in the huge of the documents, many pages. Even they mention it's very difficult to digest, etc. Because they at least cover the plan change 12, 13, 14, and 15, 4 different ones. But based on your the information, particularly emphasize this the pre-notification, the engagement is have a huge benefit. For instance, like walking the talk, and also it's more accessible to citizens. But I just want to know whether at the moment the office resources is sufficient or not, because this citywide plan change, and also need to give the residents community more confidence. This plan change can minimize all those effects, give them more confidence. Would like to follow this plan change to go on for our city and our city.
Thanks, Jimmy. You've asked the question. Can we let staff answer it, please?
Thank you. Yes, so we are ensuring that we have the resourcing to support this pre-consultation engagement. So we're working quite closely with our engagement team, and we are looking at how we best engage with our communities through this process. But staff will be available to do this work and engage with our communities.
Thank you. But how about the time frame? Because this is a pre-notified engagement, but formal engagement will be by the 20th August. Am I right? It's pre-engaged. How long this one? How much time?
Yep. So the pre-engagement period which we are proposing will run from the 11th of April to the 13th of May, and through that period we have a number of engagement opportunities which we've scheduled with the community and through our engagement team. We are looking to notify the plan changes formally in July, and there will be a second formal stage for notification as well, where the community can engage through that process.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Pauline.
Yeah, thank you. Mine was similar along the timeline. So then after July, is that when we sign this off? At the end of July, after we've heard from feedback from the pre-engagement, is that correct?
So we will come to council. At the moment, we're scheduled to come to the Urban Development and Transport Committee on the 7th of July to seek approval for formal notification. And that formal notification will occur from the 22nd of July. And we're still working through what the post notification period will look like. We want to work with the independent hearings panel as they're set up so that they have some ownership or control over that process moving forward. But it will be open for engagement for at least a period of 20 working days, and we will take that feedback and work through the process. The recommendation from the independent hearings panel will then be brought to council to seek your approval on that recommendation. And that process must be completed by the 20th of August 2023.
Yeah, and so we won't be able to change the independent hearings panel decision. We can only approve it or send it back. Is that correct?
So the options under the Amendment Act are for any points where council disagree with the recommendation from the independent hearings panel, those points of disagreement will go to the Minister for the Environment and he'll make the ultimate decision.
Okay. Actually, do you know what? When we go out for the engagement with the public, 11th of April, 13th of May, a chart, a diagram of all that would be really helpful, I think. And I have another question around financial contributions. And apparently we have always been able to charge these, but once this comes into play, we'll be able to charge financial contributions on developments that do not require resource consent. Have we ever charged financial contributions?
We don't currently charge financial contributions through the district plan. I'm not sure about the history of our city plans.
5.14 says we've always been able to, so I was just wondering if there were any situations where we had.
Just to follow on from Emily's response, we had provisions for financial contributions in the old city plan before the district plan review, the details of which I'll need to come back to you around what they were taken for. But yes, you're right, provisions for taking financial contributions have been in the RMA previously.
Well, that's really helpful if you would send something. Thanks, Mark. And I'm also wondering because this actually comes into effect in August this year, these changes. Am I correct? Even though they'll be signed off by August 2023. Correct?
Yes, some parts of this, these plan changes will have immediate legal effect, so they will have standing from when we notify them in July.
Yeah, so does that mean that we could, if required, on a case-by-case basis, have the ability to charge a financial contribution from August this year?
Unfortunately not. So we did seek through our submission to the Amendment Act that the date when financial contributions would have legal effect was brought forward to align with the MDRS, but that was not taken up. And so there is an advantage for early movers there, where financial contributions will take effect when the plan becomes operative, the plan change becomes operative.
Okay, that's disappointing, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a question from me. If it goes through the process and actually the government disagree with the outcome of the independent hearings panel, what happens then?
So that won't be within the scope of the decision making for the minister. If the council and the independence hearing panel agree, that content then is operative. That doesn't go through to the minister for a decision.
Okay, excellent.
It's only the parts that the council disagree with that get sent through to the minister.
Okay. And the financial contribution, so that can be done for externalities. Would that include, say, shading?
We haven't got the evidence base prepared to support that, but it is something that we could investigate further. The financial contributions need to be related to an impact of the intensification. So looking at how that will impact on our environment.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yanni.
Thank you. Is council able to consider, I'm just mindful of the deputations we've heard this morning around people's ability to participate in this process because of the very complicated and technical aspects of it. Are we able to consider, and I know we made this as part of our submission to government, some sort of community funding or community expertise that can be put in place through the process to help people?
Yes, definitely. As we move to formal notification, we are investigating a tool called Friend of the Submitter, which is often used through plan changes and district plan reviews, where there is an independent planner which can provide advice on the system and the process to the community. And we've had discussions with MFE on that too.
And what was MFE's view? Would they fund, for example, a residents group to get technical planning expert advice?
MFE are still working through the funding that they're prepared to provide to us to support council through this process. So we need to wait for any recommendation from MFE on that.
Okay, can I just flag to the committee chair that I think we should actually pass a resolution today and send a letter to MFE or to the minister raising that one of the principles of some of the RMA reforms that was proposed was to enable more people to participate, and that there is a need for an urgent resource to be made available to communities to participate in these plan change processes.
Thanks, Yanni. Could you just email email that through, please?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I had two other questions, but I'm happy to let someone else go and then come back to me if you like.
Pauline, you've still got your hand up. Do you have another question or?
Yeah, I do, just quickly,
Yeah,
if I may. I'm just wondering the process after we've heard from the pre-consultation, is there an opportunity for us to make changes in this report? Are we expecting to be able to do that in response?
Yes, we will come back to you following the feedback we received from our communities through pre-consultation engagement in a briefing, and provide an overview of the information we've received, and that would be an opportunity for some feedback from elected members.
Great, thank you.
Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really interested to know, and this sort of came out of the tree response, but also a more general response for people that want to put forward, whether it's a historic character area or other reasons why. As part of the engagement process, is it better for councils to make amendments for what we're going out for the pre-notification, or are we able to listen to what the community says and then make changes as a result? I'm just not quite sure, because I hear that we've got limited resource to do the changes that people might want, like trees. And so just wanted to get a sense of where energy is best focused in terms of the outcomes that some of us might like to try and aspire to. Thank you.
I'll answer that. In terms of just trees, for example, we don't want to create an expectation during the pre-notification engagement consultation that then we can't deliver on when we come to notify the plan change. And just to clarify, the scope of what we're implementing in terms of the government's direction is the areas appropriate for intensification, and we do have scope to introduce qualifying matters to exclude areas from intensification or to reduce the level of intensification, and that's based on matters such as heritage and trees. We're proposing to review the existing schedule of trees for what has got value that we can demonstrate as a qualifying matter, but what is not in scope in staff's view is a wider review of the schedule of trees. Putting aside this plan change, the schedule of trees remains in place in the district plan, and there continues to be rules on pruning and felling regardless of whether a tree is a qualifying matter. But I would be concerned if we open the door too wide such that we get numerous requests for this forthcoming engagement that people can put forward a tree or an item when we won't be able to address it through the notified plan change. And just to be clear, the scope of the proposed plan change is not to open up a review of the wider schedule of trees, and that will certainly be challenged. In any plan change process, we have people come in the door wanting to get in the door and to widen the scope of what we've proposed. But I think any review of the tree schedule we should really be looking at as part of a future plan change, rather than opening the door to any number of new items being identified.
Thank you. So is that, so if we'd done a plan change like a year ago around trees, then we would be able to incorporate that in now, but because we haven't done a specific plan change on tree protection, either adding new listings or changing the valuation method, is what you're saying that we simply would not have scope to do that as part of this process?
The short answer is no, we haven't done the work required to add new trees as a qualifying matter, like we've done for residential heritage areas, for example, but it doesn't preclude us from doing a future plan change and then as part of a future plan change, introducing that as a qualifying matter at a future date.
How long would that amendment process take?
A plan change would take at least 12 months from preparation through to decision. That's tight in itself. What I suggest we do to move that forward is we come to you with our program of work across affecting other parts of the district plan, and just discuss priorities and how we resource that if council is minded to progress that plan change.
Okay, and just a final question from me is in regards to the character areas. Like, appreciate there's been a lot of work done previously. Appreciate that you've narrowed down the focus. We heard a submitter the other day raise Barnett Avenue, the social housing. We know that there might be other communities around, Rickett and Bush, for example, where people do want greater character protection. People have the ability through this pre-engagement to raise areas of interest, and we have the ability to assess those. Is that correct? So we don't need to add them in today, but we could, if people were concerned, they could put them into the process, and then there's an ability to assess whether they should be included.
The short answer is yes. The work that we've done to date is really to validate at a high level the character areas that are contained currently within the district plan. Of course, recognise that there might be other character areas that have merit that aren't currently contained within the district plan. And you're right, this is part of the process, is to go out to the community to validate whether or not they agree basically with what we propose, but also for them to potentially nominate where there might be other areas of character that are worthy of inclusion that meet the same criteria that we've also included within the district plan. And that's why we've purposefully staged the process for validation for character areas, that the more detailed level of assessment or phase 2 will be completed after this pre-engagement period, where we can both validate or further validate the existing character areas that we have, but also validate any nominations that come forward through the process.
Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you. Look, it's just not clear enough for me, because when Yanni asked the question about making changes after the pre-consultation, the comment was feedback rather than changes. So I really want to make it clear, because when we go out for consultation, and we've had it, for some time, that people aren't listened to. Just to explain, we can make changes to the proposed district plan as it is. Is that correct, following the pre-consultation?
I can answer that. So this pre-consultation engagement's an informal stage in the consultation process, and people can submit feedback. The key difference between this stage of consultation and after formal notification is the scope for us to make changes is not limited by what people have said in this round of consultation. So if there's anything we identify that requires change, we can do that after this initial phase of consultation and up until notification. Upon the plan change being notified before 20th of August, we, upon notification and inviting submissions, the scope for us to make changes, or the scope for changes to be made to the plan change in that subsequent formal period is limited to what has been expressed in submissions. And so staff, for instance, through the formal process, couldn't recommend changes that go beyond the scope of what has been submitted on. So there's a lot more freedom or flexibility in terms of what we can change in light of feedback in this forthcoming process than when we get to notification and the process thereafter.
Thank you. The second question is, and you mentioned that once the plan change goes through, we can make changes to the district plan. Now, my understanding is that is quite a substantial effort to do that. Can you explain, or maybe we can bring that up later, but I think, as it was mentioned earlier, we've got to be kind of as honest as possible. So it's not an easy process to make changes to the district plan, is it?
The process of, we can make changes to the district plan in the future. These plan changes are in direct response to government direction, but we have a program of plan changes. It's not that we can commence work on new plan changes. We have to follow a process that's prescribed in the RMA, Schedule 1, and that sets out steps that we have to go through, and key for that is having allowing sufficient time. It's a lengthy process and can take at least 12 months for a plan change to go through, and that in itself requires staff to prepare the plan change and then to lead that plan change through the process. So it's not easy in the sense that there's a process to work through, but it's the process has always been there and is with the intent of giving people the adequate opportunity to submit and be involved in the process and to present to a hearings panel, but also ensuring there's sufficient evidence to support any plan change.
Yeah. And as we have a schedule of changes, it can take some time. I mean, you mentioned 12 months, but if there's a list of a schedule of plan changes, could be a list of them. So it takes more than 12 months in the sense that there are others in front of that one, if there were one.
That's right. I think, as I said earlier, we'll come to you with a program of what that list of plan changes is. We can commence a plan change at any time and change our priorities around. So a plan change may go up the order in terms of commencing that, and each individual plan change will go through its process either in parallel or following an earlier plan change.
Thank you. Cheers.
Pauline.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to test the appetite of the committee to include another note as per Helen Broughton's recommendation, which I agree with. And I've just got some wording here that would say, these plan changes are a directive from central government, and many changes around intensification are not necessarily supported by council. Is there an appetite to include something along those lines there?
Do you want to email that through, Pauline, so we can write it up?
I'd support that, Pauline.
Okay, I'll do that now.
Yeah. Well, are there any other questions? Okay, what we might do is because time's getting on, and I know this is going to create a debate anyhow, we might just have a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll actually get it moved and seconded, and then we'll go into debate. So 11:45 we'll resume. Meeting adjourned. Kia ora koutou. We'll resume the meeting. I've just added a couple of resolutions that obviously notes the concerns that Councillor Cotter mentioned. So we'll just put them up on the screen. So 4 is around the trees. Note that a full review of the list of protected trees is outside the scope of this plan change due to resourcing constraints, and that individual tree protection will be considered in a future plan change. And 5, note the current housing affordability crisis, the role of housing supply and different types of housing in helping address this concern and the need to future-proof land use in Christchurch. However, notes concerns about the fast pace, impact on the existing natural environment and the one-size-fits-all government-directed approach of the Mpsud and resource management, enabling housing supply and other matters, Amendment Act 2021. I'm actually happy to move all those resolutions. Do I have a seconder? Pauline. So I'm happy. Sorry, I can't see the screen, Yanni, but is that a little hand up? Yanni, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
I don't know if he's there, Mike.
Okay.
There is. There is.
I've got this tiny screen. I can only just make things out. Okay, well, he's not talking, so I'm going to go into...
Sorry. Hello?
Yes, Yanni. Sorry, I've got a small screen, so I'm struggling to see hands up. So do you have a something you want to say?
Yeah, it was just a question over the new amendments.
They're not amendments. Yes.
Well, the notes, sorry, the notes. Well, two things. One is number 4, like I think that's more relevant to the after we've heard the feedback from people around the plan change, but I don't know if we need to actually say that now. Because if we get overwhelming feedback from the community that they want us to look at that issue, then I think we need to turn our mind to it.
Yeah, so this is actually trying to actually be upfront with the community, that actually having, trying to go forward and do a whole heap of work around listing trees and protecting trees is just actually not possible with the resources we've got and the timing. So there may be some individual trees that get brought forward, but actually the bigger work around this needs to be done for a future plan change. This is actually trying to be upfront and transparent with the community about that right now.
Well, I don't agree we should be trying to influence the feedback that we're getting from the community. And also, as you said, staff have said that there will be some, although limited capacity, to assess new listings of trees. Okay. And so I think that would be a more positive way of framing it.
So I suggest, therefore, you can vote against it, which I have no problem.
Yeah, okay.
And if you want, you can put forward an amendment, but they'll probably, we'll have to make sure that it's valid. So are you happy just to vote against it?
Yeah, sure. And speak. I wish to speak to it as well. But the only other thing is just another additional note that the staff said in the response to the question around community participation that we were in contact with Ministry for the Environment. So I just wondered if we could just add a very simple note that the council notes, the complexity and the technical nature of the proposed plan change and the need for the community to be resourced to participate, and that staff are discussing this matter with Ministry for the Environment as a priority.
Okay, that's not a problem. Could you just email that to us so we can get it in there a bit quicker with your words? And
cool.
And we'll now go into debate. Sorry, Yanni, do you want to open up the debate, and then we'll get that words done during the debate, rest of the debate.
Thank you. I just want to start off by recognising the huge amount of work that our staff have had to go through to put this pre-consultation or on the notification plan together. So I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I am really concerned about trees, I think, for two reasons. One is that in the district plan review, there was a lot of disquiet about the way in which we changed the evaluation methodology of trees, and in some perspectives of the community, that we lessened the value of protected trees in our district plan. And two, that we also need to be providing new listings and also an ability to recognise the areas of the city that have lower tree canopy and look to be proactive in protecting canopy in those areas, because clearly the risk is, with the delay in the financial contributions coming in, that there's a gold rush from August, and what we see will be a lot of trees and canopy loss in areas that already have low levels of it because the land values may be cheaper. So, I just think we need to act with urgency around trees. I am disappointed because there was a resolution from the tree policy hearing over nearly a year ago to get work done on that by July last year, which would have given us the time, if we wanted to make the resources available, to have made changes to our district plan around tree protection. And unfortunately, council didn't agree to that when that hearing panel reported back. But it was very, very obvious from that hearings from the community at that time that there was a real need for urgency around trees. The other point I want to make is that I really thank staff and acknowledge the work around the character areas. And I still think there's a number of other areas in the city that are not included in this pre-notification. But I think the main component of this has to be that if council weren't to proceed today to engage with our community and weren't putting this plan change forward with a number of qualifying matters, we would have much worse outcomes in our city and for our community. So although there's some things in here that are not perfect, this is much better than just not doing anything and not doing the work. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and encourage the community to make as many submissions as possible to be engaged in this process. I think it is really good that we're going out ahead of the notified plan change to get community feedback. But as has been said, I won't support the note around the trees that has been put in, but I'm happy to support the note around the concern around this process being directed to us by central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni. Pauline.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Yanni said, and I just think that our biggest concerns here really with this is the over-intensification and accompanying loss of amenity, which leads to reduced well-being of our residents. And with over-intensification, of course, comes this horrendous tree loss. We're also concerned about the one-size-fits-all top-down directive approach, and the lack of heritage and character areas that have been included. And so just picking up on the tree concerns that I have too, and I see where Yanni's coming from here, because time is of the essence. They're dropping like flies. And because of the tree loss, our cities are getting hotter with climate change. Trees keep us cool. So we are at risk of ending up with concrete jungles. And trees take decades to mature, and they need nurturing and a lot of time in their early years to ensure that they survive. So removing a tree and then saying I'm replacing it with another couple, it actually has massive implications when it comes to true replacement. The question is, can we outpace the chainsaws in St Albans? I don't know. This is not giving me comfort. And where are all the green rooftops and the gardens and the wall gardens in our designs? We're not seeing any of them. Where are the smart designs? For our suburbs, we could actually intensify and do it well, and we could retain amenity, and we could address climate change goals in our building. So that's a challenge there for developers to step up voluntarily. But for now, I think because we've been told that we don't have the resource to protect trees that are currently not protected, our job is to concentrate on trees on public land. So protect and increase our numbers through our urban forest plan, and that's coming up So look, I just want to encourage residents to please feed back to us through the pre-engagement process, and we are listening and we're really passionate about this. So reluctantly, I will support that clause you've put in, because I think that lets people know what is going on here and they can comment on that as well in the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Jimmy.
Okay, yeah. Same as Yanni, I'm still a little bit disappointed regarding to this bullet point 4. This tree is not a part of this overall kind of district plan review. But I think these are the pre-notification engagement is very, very crucial, because this the implement the Mpsud and also the recently introduced those medium density residential standard. So this all the kind of the opportunity. Particularly we would like to to humble ourselves to listen to the people. Particularly if we review the officers' information. This benefit is walking the talk and more accessible to citizens. If we thought that this whole package, plan change the 12, that's cost hazard, that's the next item will be discussed. Plan change the 13, that's particular for the heritage, the area of heritage package. Also, most important, plan change 14, let's consider, for the population growth, the housing increase, but also those kind of today we heard those amenity character will be the affected. So we need to more listen to people to get every possible opportunity. But if this time we lost the tree, and also compared to Wellington and Auckland, we are all aware we are less. The tree cannot be covered the percentage. We have to speed up progress, how to mitigate those the effect. The other one is particular the financial contribution. I think that's a powerful tool, because one aspect can mitigate the reverse effect of increased this development. Also can improve the environment, in both residential, commercial and industrial area. But the problem is how do we through this pre-notification engagement to let the people, to let the community aware, we have this powerful tool. We can mitigate all those effects.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Give them more confidence. This is my view. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Mel.
Thanks. Jimmy actually said a wee bit of what I was going to say about the financial contributions. That Amendment Act broadened councils or all councils' scope to apply financial contributions to developments even without a resource consent. So I think that's a good step. And I think what we're doing, and thank you to staff actually for coming up with this idea about financial contributions around trees. I think we're sending a message to developers that tree retention should be prioritised, and this is one way which we can hopefully incentivise them to look at that more seriously than they are at the moment. Yeah, so thanks.
Thank you, Mel. Are there any other people that want to speak on this debate? I can't see everyone actually on screen, so just let me know if there are. Okay, that's good. I'll quickly, I'm going to close the debate then. Just wanted to acknowledge actually the work that staff have done on this. They're obviously under quite a lot of pressure themselves because of the timeframes that have been forced upon us. I think at the same time, we do need to realise actually some of the issues we do face and will face moving forward in terms of housing affordability, in terms of the impact on the environment if we continue to sprawl. However, the effects of a one-size-fits-all approach on Christchurch obviously has significant concerns, and rightly so. And it's important that we balance actually the impact of that and the need to be progressive. And I think, therefore, that's outlined quite well in 5, that actually we need to ensure that we protect our natural environment, our existing natural environment, as well as enhancing it. But the reality is that at the moment, that we do not have the resources all the time to do a full review of the listed protected trees. I don't think that's not going to stop people coming in with individual trees, but there will become a point where actually that just becomes too large for council to deal with. I think those 2 additional notes outlines our concerns, but actually realising that we're having to do this because of government direction, and some of the outcome of this will actually be better. Will be better for it as a city. It's just ensuring that actually we are aware of some of the concerns that have been highlighted by our communities. We're going out for pre-notification engagement, which is hugely important, so we can get some of that feedback now, and hopefully influence the notification process and go out with an even better district plan change that will go through more of a regulatory process where it has an independent hearings panel. So this is a really good opportunity. This is an excellent opportunity for community to get involved to try and influence the change before it gets into a more of a, that regulatory framework that creates a harder environment for them, which we all know about. So I'm just going to add Yanni's resolution in there. Sorry, I'm going to forward it to you. So just...
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It might need a little bit finessing by staff just to capture what their response was, but it's a general tone of it that's important. Thanks.
My video's not on. It's showing me it's not on, but I can't turn it on. But I am still here.
I've just forwarded it to staff now. We're just going to load that up just so people can see it before they actually vote on it. Has that come? Oh, maybe I sent it to the wrong people.
Oh, here it is.
Oh, excellent. So just one minute while we get that up onto the screen.
Okay, thank you. Couldn't see the screen.
Apart from 4, are there any other of these resolutions that councillors want to be put separate? Okay, so I'm just going to put 4 separate.
Yes, okay.
So I might do 4 now while we're just waiting for that to be written up. All those in favour of 4, say aye, or give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Okay. Against?
No.
No. No.
So that is Jimmy, Yanni, and Mel. Has anyone else said no?
Yeah, cool.
Great, thank you.
Like by the time I get to school.
I might just do one. Oh, is that written up now? Okay, so Yanni, the 6th resolution is noting that the complex and technical nature of the proposed plan change and the barriers to community participating the council, that the council write to MFE and relevant ministers seeking resources and support to enable community participation in the planning process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to put the resolutions 1 to 3 and 5 and 6.
Sorry, Mike, can I just ask, when we say request the council to write, is that the chief executive or the mayor?
It'll be the chief executive.
Maybe we should put that in.
Well, generally it would be the chief executive to the ministry and the mayor to the governance to the minister.
Yeah. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, we'll get the right people right in it. Yeah, so
I think Aaron's still got his microphone on, by the way.
Oh, that's good. We can hear things. All right, all those in favour?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay. Carried. Thank you. I can't quite see everyone, so if anyone was opposed, could you just let me know? Good, thank you. The next item is item 8, Coastal Hazards Plan Change. Welcome, Mark. I'll let you introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly set the scene for the proposed coastal hazard plan change. Christchurch has almost 400 kilometres of coastline, and there are significant areas of low-lying land sitting behind that. The current rate of greenhouse gas emissions, we're expecting to experience 30 centimetres of sea level rise by 2050 and 1 metre within the next 100 years. As a result, Christchurch is more exposed to coastal hazards than either Auckland or Wellington. Coastal hazards were intended to be incorporated into the district plan review, but following submissions, an order in council in 2015 directed that they be withdrawn from that process and dealt with separately and as soon as practicable. In 2020, council established a coastal hazards working group to guide the work on our coastal hazards programme. And last year, a new coastal hazards assessment was prepared, which provides up-to-date data for the whole of the district. Following that, council approved an issues and options discussion paper that went out for engagement in October 2021. And we had an extensive period of engagement with over 40 meetings and drop-in sessions, reaching significant numbers of people across the city. From that, we had 55 submissions and 35 pro formas that provided feedback on the direction that we should be taking in developing a plan change. And the Coastal Hazard Working Group has heard deputations from 12 of those submitters. The submissions and the direction from the Coastal Hazard Working Group has all contributed to shaping the draft plan change, which is before you today. The draft plan change has taken a risk-based approach. Hazards have been mapped according to levels of risk, and this is enabling us to take a more nuanced approach that better reflects local circumstances. So we're not needing to adopt a blanket one-size-fits-all situation. We can actually tailor the response to the local situation. The plan change contains a suite of new objectives, policies and rules, and these are designed to help manage subdivision development and land use within areas of coastal hazards. Overall, it seeks to be more permissive where risks are low and can be easily managed, and more controlled where the risks are higher. The coastal hazards represent one of the qualifying matters that can be used to regulate the level of intensification of development, and therefore is a linkage with the previous plan changes you've been discussing this morning. The recommendation we have for you today is that the committee approves the draft coastal hazard plan change for community engagement. And this will provide a further step that will allow the community to contribute to shaping the formal plan change, which we expect to bring back to you later this year for notification. And that really concludes the introduction. Happy to hand back to you now, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. Is it other people? Okay. Is there someone that'd like to move this? Celeste, thank you. I'm happy to second it. Is there any debate? Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. As someone who was on the working party, I just again want to acknowledge the work that staff have done in this regard and thank the community for the submissions that they've made. I have raised the concern through the working party around the sequence of planning reform, both at a central government level and also at a regional council level. Staff have made it really clear around why the need to prioritise this work, and I understand their point of view. And I guess today, really, the key thing is to put this out for pre-notification. So again, this isn't the final plan going out. So I'm happy to support it going out for the pre-notification, although I do have concerns around the sequencing around the higher level documents and plans that both central government and regional council are working on. But I think the important thing is to, again, get this out for the community feedback rather than hold it up today. And based on that feedback, I think then, I'll certainly reassess my view, but I don't want to hold this up from getting in front of the community at the moment. But just wanted to make those concerns, just put those concerns on record, because there were submitters, again, who did want more time to look at some of the implications of what was going on as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni. Is there any other? Okay. Yeah, look, I'd like to echo some of Yanni's comments around acknowledging both community and staff. Once again, this is another process that we're going through to make sure that we align with the New Zealand coastal policy statement and also the regional policy statement, and we are been out of line from that for quite a while. So therefore we're having to do this, and obviously now with the Mpsud and qualifying matters, it's also really important that this is done. But this does impact community, and we are trying to work with community as much as possible, and hence we have already done a first round of pre-notification engagement when we went out with the issues and options paper, and it did highlight the concerns this community have. Obviously at that point of time we did 2 engagements on this, and actually the adaptation framework, which is going a slightly different paths even though they're linked. But this is actually quite an important piece of work that needs to happen. It has to happen, and it's actually about protecting future communities and future risk to the city from increased coastal hazards. Look, I welcome this and have a conversation with the community before we actually do the notification of the plan change. So I'll be supporting this as well. And if there's no one else that wants to talk, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Say aye, raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Carried. Okay. The next item is item 9, the plan change for short-term accommodation, and Abby is presenting this.
It's Mark Stevenson. I'll be presenting this. If I can ask Chair to just give a brief summary to start.
Yes, thanks, Mark.
Great. So proposed plan change forward to the district plan on short-term accommodation. It was initiated in response to significant growth in short-term accommodation in residential areas, which has given rise to adverse effects on amenity, character and coherence of residential neighbourhoods. The current framework in the district plan doesn't provide for short-term accommodation in residential units, for example, Airbnb, which has acted as an impediment to the lawful establishment of such activities, and that framework's been viewed as inappropriate by commissioners on resource consent applications, but also by the Environment Court. While visitor accommodation in a residential unit is currently a discretionary activity by which council can grant or decline consent, it was cited in legal submissions of council that it's been almost impractical to consent such activities because of the strict policies in the district plan at the moment. Proposed plan change 4 is notified, sought a balance of enabling the activity in recognition of the benefits, but also balancing this with managing effects on neighbourhoods. A distinction is proposed and was endorsed by the panel between hosted accommodation, where the resident is present, versus unhosted accommodation, and a more enabling approaches taken to hosted accommodation in recognition of the effects being less. Also worth saying that a tiered approach was proposed by council when it approved the plan change for notification, with a controlled activity status for consent up up to 60 nights per year, meaning that resource consent must be granted. Beyond 60 days to 180 nights, discretionary activity status was proposed and for which consent can be granted or declined. And then above 180 nights, it was proposed as non-complying activity status, generally being for activities not anticipated by the plan. The council's planner recommended for more than 60 nights per year that it be a discretionary activity, and that remains the case in what the panel have recommended. As a general statement, the panel have accepted the position recommended by council's planner based on the evidence and submissions made over a week-long hearing. There has been some changes in the method for managing noise of late night arrivals and changes to the policy for managing residential coherence, but it otherwise maintains consistency with what was put forward. The options available to the council in respect of this report are outlined in paragraph 4.3, and the council, in making a decision, can't come to a different, can't propose an alternative resolution. The options are to refer to either approve the recommendations, to adopt the panel's recommendations, or to refer the matter back to the panel. If the council was to refer it back to the panel, it must be satisfied there's grounds to do so, and such grounds would be limited, including an issue with the panel's recommendations. The council could otherwise appoint different commissioners, but that in itself presents risks. The third option is the withdrawal of the plan change, and it's staff's recommendation that you approve the recommendations which have maintained the integrity of what was put forward in the notified plan change, and staff think that the panel's recommendations are sound. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions on this item? Okay, does someone like to move it?
We've just got this section here where it says accepts in part to reject.
Okay, could we just remove everything apart from the accepts the submission, sorry? We'll leave the submissions in there. Sorry. Accepts the submissions. And then we can... Thank you. We can take the bold off too, I guess. Is there someone that would like to second it?
Yeah, happy to second it, Mike.
Thank you, Jake. Any debate? Yanni?
Sorry, I just had my hand up for a question.
Oh, I asked that before. Yanni, your question?
Yeah, I was just like, given the changes that have been put in place, I guess I'm just interested to understand from staff's perspective what consideration was given to residential coherence, because that's one thing that came through early on in the discussion document, and some of the submitters raised the concern around the length of time that someone may be able to use an Airbnb. So this is, like, for example, the central city, where you've got neighbourhoods that, if they predominantly had the Airbnb short-term accommodation rentals, then you lose a sense of neighbourhood because you don't have community residential coherence in terms of people in the community being there for an extended period of time. So I was just curious to understand what assessment, if any, was done in that regard around the impact that it would have, and especially in light of the changes.
Thank you, Councillor Johansson. The panel received submissions and evidence from a number of submitters on the effects that it can have on coherence with multiple units within a block or multiple section properties on a residential block being used for such accommodation. The panel made some statements in their closing and encouraged the council to put forward some changes to the policy to explicitly address the impacts on residential coherence. And So the policies that the panel have recommended, one of which seeks to avoid visitor accommodation in a residential unit where it's inconsistent with retaining, I'm just reading from the policy, where it's inconsistent with retaining predominantly residential character and coherence. So that policy use of the word avoid is strong and requires that there be retention of predominantly residential coherence. The council did put forward some additions to define how that would be measured, and council's wording referred to at least half the block being used for not being used for unhosted. Sorry, at least half the block being used for residential purposes. What the panel have proposed as an alternative to the wording put forward by council is that each residential block retains a high proportion of residential activities, but they've also included that each residential activity retains a high proportion of residential neighbours. So it's not just how many are on the block, but also that any property that is used for short-term accommodation also retains that high proportion of residential neighbours. So in that context, they've been quite explicit with regards to coherence effects and have addressed that in their report. So in my view, they've adequately addressed the issue from a staff perspective, it's sound.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye, or give me your thumbs. Thank you. Anyone opposed?
Mike, I did have a debate. Sorry, it all happened so quickly. I'll just really quickly say well, up to you. We have taken a vote.
I haven't seen carried, Jake, so you're all right. You've just got in.
Awesome, thank you. Look, the introduction of Plan Change 4 brings unhosted Airbnb out of the shadows and into the light, and naturally we have to make sure that when this regime is up and running, we enforce it appropriately so the community don't have to police it, and that's something they're quite worried about. One thing I wanted to highlight is that these restrictions apply to room nights advertised, not occupied. So with an average occupancy rate of around 50%, the community should take some comfort from this. Plan Change 4 definitely doesn't go as far as the community would like. They were hopeful of a regime that would restrict this activity and protect inner city neighbourhoods. However, it's more than a good start, and a lot of work has been put in. And I'm absolutely certain it will make the situation better and help mitigate the effects. Anything essentially has to be better than the status quo.
Thanks, Jake. I'm going to have to re-put it because your debate in support might have turned people off, but I don't think so. I hope not. All those in favour? Any opposed? Excellent. Good debate, Jake. We'll now move to item 10. Oh, it's carried. Item 10, Transport Report. Welcome, Lynette. Is Lynette online?
She was going to come here.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
Here she is.
Oh, she walked into the room. Welcome, Lynette. Yes. Is there any questions on the transport report? Did you want to do a brief overview? Or are you happy to go to questions?
I was just going to highlight a couple of quick points actually that were additional to the report, and I brought, seeing as there's a bit about maintenance in the back of this, I've brought Steve Guy along with me, our new maintenance manager. My main highlight was we've talked in the report about Lincoln Road Stage 1, and we were talking when we wrote this report about looking to appoint a contractor. That contractor has now been appointed. Isaac's Construction have won that work, and they are looking to start early May if they can. Fingers crossed, weather holds for us a bit and lets us get going. Stage 2 just for information, Stage 2 of Lincoln Road has been through its hearings process, so is expected to report, the hearings panel's expected to report June, I think it is. The only other highlight I had on the report for your information, it's just to bring to everyone's attention. There's a flow chart in the report that's very small and very difficult to read, so we have added it as a separate attachment so you can read it. And that's about it for me, really.
Thank you, Yanni. No, you're on mute, Yanni.
Thanks. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, sorry, I just had three questions. We were going to get some information back on the capacity of off-street car parking buildings. Do we have an expected time frame for that?
Capacity of off-street car parking buildings.
Sorry, the occupancy of the capacity. Sorry, the occupancy, not capacity.
Isn't that in the report?
It came up during the annual plan debate, the draft annual plan, and there'd been it's also come up during finance and performance, and I think transport committee as well. But there was a request to get the historic data of the occupancy of our off-street car parking buildings, just to get a sense of, how they're being utilised. So I just was wondering.
So that is underway. It is actually quite a substantial piece of work, and staff are working on it, and it will be back in time to inform the annual plan as it was requested through the annual plan.
Right. Okay.
Thanks, Yanni, that's been answered.
Okay. The Cranford Street bus trial. Have we got any update on that?
I haven't got an update for you today, but I can provide it in maybe the next report.
Right. When is it due? Sorry, just can you just refresh my mind? When is it due to come back to council? Is it a 1-year evaluation from
it's going back
a few months ago?
It's being dealt with through the community board, is my understanding, but I haven't got the dates on me. I'm sorry.
Through the Papanui Innis Community Board.
Yes.
Yeah. The community board are having briefings. They're very aware of the bus lane. Yeah. Your next question.
Oh yeah. Okay. And the final question from me was, I've just put it's a comment question. I've just put forward a recommendation just to see if we could get some staff advice on the future streets, the Aranui Future Streets report and community insight report, whether we could just get some advice back around how to progress the next steps. Yeah.
So the next steps for that, and this has been reported back to the community board, and the next steps for that report is for the community board to highlight what priorities they want to work on and how we move that forward. It needs to come through the community board.
Has that gone to both community boards?
Yes, my understanding is it has.
Right. Are you able just to send us the briefing? Sorry, I haven't been able to find it or see it, but
I suggest you go back to your community board governance team. They will have it all.
Right. Okay.
Yanni, this needs the community board to lead it and make it a priority project. And if it expands to community boards, which actually next term it probably won't, it'll be one community board. Then it's a really good opportunity for the new Linwood Bird Coastal to actually lead this project and put it up as a priority one to the council. So. But
yeah, I think what you'll find, Mike, is that unfortunately, because of the resourcing issue and capacity issues, like we've got things that we've already made a priority that we're struggling to get progress on, like the Bromley roads. So, I was just interested at a high level what we could do, because it would be good to have a process underway.
Sorry, you're not listening. It needs to come through the community board, and you will be on that community board. So we will expect to see it coming through there as a priority. Jimmy, did you have a question?
Oh, yes, I have one question on page 52. Then I ask you regarding this flow chart of the remove the tree. I just want to know when, for the infrastructure, and when remove the tree, absolutely you will present it to the community board, etc. approved. but whether we have any the principle of a policy, at the same time, those the landscaping, the plan, including the tree species, also to be available, presented to the community board as well.
Is that for the replacement trees?
Yes, yes, because you remove, they need to replacement. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. For the infrastructure
So
one, yes.
the request can come through to remove. They will have to come back, and if they cannot, if the staff cannot replace it, if they don't have the replacement design done, it won't be at the same report, but they will have to come back and advise the board of where the replacements are being made, and that's what they are doing. The policy is in place to replace, for every tree that is taken down, is to replace with at least 2. They can't, unfortunately, they can't always go back in the same place, because if there's services there, we can't necessarily plant trees above them.
Okay. Yeah, but community and residents, affected residents, particularly concern the time frame, because when your infrastructure has been undertaken and finished, and they look forward to the new replanting tree will be available.
And the new
rather than just take a long time.
Jimmy, let him answer.
And the new replanted trees will be planted in the planting season, so they will be advised when they're planted, but they will always be planted in the planting season, which may not be at the same time as the infrastructure build's done. But Councillor, for your information, this little article here is about how the community and the new process that we've set up for how the community can raise their concerns about trees that are affecting them personally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Before I go to Aaron, just a couple of questions from me. In regards to, I just want to get some clarification, really. With the bus lane, my assumption, though, it's obviously going through the community board, is they will make a recommendation to council for council to be the final decision maker on the outcome of it. Yeah, thank you. The other one around the tree policy and allowing community boards to make decisions. Are we finding that they're making is there any decisions that have been made, I guess, outside of the tree policy guidelines in terms of removing trees?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. So it's okay. Are we going to do a review of that just to make sure that we're not chopping down trees that sort of go against an arborist's professional opinion on whether a tree should be chopped down?
Yes, and that's why this process is highlighted. Sorry, having one of those mornings. That's why this process is highlighted, and we've raised it with you, so that you can understand what evidence needs to be supplied in order to make that decision. Because it may be contrary to arborist's advice, but there may be other reasons, medical condition, whatever.
Okay, but if the recommendation from staff was actually there was no reason to remove the tree, basically it was outside of policy to remove it, would that therefore have to come to council for a decision, or could community boards go outside of policy to remove a
I believe community boards have delegation over trees.
Even if they went outside of policy, they could just remove any healthy tree that didn't actually fit the criteria?
No, it would need a resource consent, needs a consent. Boards have to get a consent is what I believe.
I will have to get you some more advice on that. I'll tell you what, we might wrap up that advice into another little article next month.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, you've got a question or two?
Sorry, wrong button. Or even a briefing on that, Mike, probably wouldn't hurt, or as a subject for a briefing, just to walk us all through where trees are at and what have been the consequences of that. So my question, Lynette, is just an update. I believe you know the area well, of Gardeners Road for the shared path. Where's that at the moment?
Gardeners Road is still there.
The road isn't.
Sorry, I was being flippant. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's actually been a little bit more of the path finished because the development's been ongoing down there. So the section down between Claridge's Road up to sort of the pumpkin patch paddock has been, which everyone knows is
Mostly
pumpkin
done.
patch, but it is mostly done. The rest of it, my understanding is design is underway and progressing. So that's all I can tell you. If you like, I'll add it as an update for the next report.
Yeah, it'll be good to be able to update the public on when some work's happened down the other end, and we'll be moving. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Anne.
Kia ora. Hi, Lynette. I'm really interested in the Park Smart program and learning a bit more about that. I think it's the first time I've heard about this.
Yes. I'm going to have to come back to you on that one because I thought someone had asked me that question and I couldn't find the answer before I got here. Sorry. It looks great. And I'm really keen to make sure we can do what we can, working with our communities to ensure we can reduce the chaos and the tension at school gates. It'll be great. So I'll come back to you with a bit more update.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And this might be another question you can't answer, but I'm wondering if you can give any update at all. We seem to have a bit of conflicting information about the Milnes Road, Sparks Road intersection. And I'm just wondering, you don't have to give it now, but I'd be keen to know exactly where we're at with that, what's happening.
Milnes and Sparks?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will come back on that one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. One last question for me around footpaths. And I'm just trying to work out, I guess, the proactive approach we take to footpaths when we look to do reactive maintenance. So therefore, actually, do we walk up and down a street and say, actually, we need to be proactively doing the whole street instead of a couple of patch jobs?
Yes, we do. So I can answer that one. We get our contractors to drive the network regularly to look at specific work. But we actually had a case today where somebody went out there to look at a tree. I did a report, I pulled a report together for some of my staff to take a look at some high important footpath areas that were identified having a number of service requests, and where there were just sections, we were able to pull it all together as a capital programme instead to deliver the whole lot in one go. So yes, we do look at that.
Excellent, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No, I'm happy to move that report. Do I have a seconder? And thank you. Any debate? Okay, all those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 11, the planning and consent report. Welcome, John.
I'll just briefly run through the key points in the report. The first, item 3, is about the Resource Management Act reform. We don't have a lot to report on that at the moment. We did have a meeting with MFE, and so we're in regular contact with them, which is really positive. Item 4, this is just an update on the plan changes, and obviously you've had quite a few of those come to this meeting, so you'll be quite familiar with them. One thing we will progress in the near term is a briefing on the plan change priority list, so we'll come back to you on that, and you'll see more on that topic. And then the final item, item 5, is about resource consents, and really just highlighting there that there's a high number of applications coming in. Main driver is residential and multi-unit applications, and you'll see we the statutory compliance, the statutory timeframes is reducing. It was 53%, 84% year to date, so that and improved to 70% in February. Obviously, that's a concern to us, and we're doing everything we can to try and turn that around. Obviously, there are some things conspiring against us, like sickness with COVID, and that's having a large impact as well. But we're doing everything in that space that we can to try and turn those results around. And finally, I just wanted to highlight in the key applications list, there was one that, and my apologies, it wasn't updated in the list, and it's highlighted in yellow. and it's about an application on Kaitariti Spit. This is where the Rocket Lab proposal was. So this is a new proposal on the same site, and this is for operation of testing of drones primarily. So apologies that wasn't updated, but that's meant to be in there. So, and any questions on?
Thanks, John. Are there any questions? No, excellent. Someone like Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. And I don't know if you can roll it into one or two sentences, but I believe that drone application and around the spit there is part of an entire area where there's a no-fly zone in off the side of Christchurch type thing, which was especially put there for the ability to advance science and blah, blah. I remember that from years ago. Is that still there? And can you kind of explain that to members that might not even know that it exists and why that might be coming through?
Yeah, there's and this is one of the reasons Rocket Lab identified this site. There was a number of reasons, but this was one of them where there's restrictions over the flight path over this area. And there is an old University of Canterbury sort of testing facility here for rockets, and they do some drone activity there as well. But yes, it's, aside from that, I can't elaborate on that too much more. But it's been there for some while, as I understand it, and that's one of the attractions over this site.
Okay, so it does still exist, and it now makes all the others aware of it. Obviously, one day it'd be good to get a bit of an update on what's happening and how it's been beneficial to the city. But thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Tim.
Thank you. John, just putting out 5.6 with regards to the reply to the survey, electronic survey. I think it is outstanding that with all the pressure your team and also the building consents and the others in the planning areas and the building consents areas, that 89% of respondents to date are satisfied with the service. So do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, so the satisfaction levels surprisingly are staying quite high. One of the reasons we think that is that we're putting quite a bit of effort into communicating with applicants. So while there are delays, we're trying to keep people up to date on those delays, and I think that's proving to be helpful in terms of keeping people satisfied about the process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Would someone like to move this report?
I'll move it.
Tim, seconder. Jimmy, thank you. Any debate? All those in favour, show your thumb. Any opposed? Carried. Item 12, Regulatory Services Building Consenting Unit Report, January and February 2022. Welcome, Robert. I'll pass it over to you to introduce your report before some questions.
Kia ora, good morning, good afternoon now. Yeah, just a brief overview. As you can see from the numbers, we've had a slight improvement in our performance. The worm is turning upwards slightly, although there is still a significant workload in front of us to deal with. Good to see a buoyant sector, but frustrating not to be able to service it faster. Reasonably satisfied that we're doing all that we can to do that, get that work through, but with the resources the way they are across the country, it's hard to make any more impact than we are at the moment. We're also seeing a significant demand now going on our inspection service. We have had some new staff start in that area recently, and we've also rolled out some new technology that allows us to do some simpler inspections remotely. So that is proving to be quite an efficient mechanism. The other data in the report also focuses on just the activity here and across the country. You can see the number of dwellings consented, just how busy Christchurch has been. And also the tables show the complexity and value of the work has significantly increased from the past. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Question, Tim.
I might have left my hand up, but look, I'm just going on from just the numbers are phenomenal. So I just think you and your team are doing an amazing job. The highest number in 57 years. It's quite phenomenal. Thank you. And I'm happy to move it, Mike, if you need to move it.
Thanks, Tim. Any other questions before I get seconded? Excellent. Who would like to second this report? Sam. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Robert, for a very good report. All those in favour, raise your hand. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll just now close the meeting with a karakia from Councillor Cotter.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Cool. Tukuna te wārua ki rere ki te taumata. O te matatika mo te pono, hi arahi ina mahi. Ka auratahi te tira kia iki panuku, kia iki tangaroa. Homie, hui, tai ki e.
Your meeting closed. Thank you.